everyone. Welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast, where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me, as always, is Amanda. Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. We've just got off a plane to Japan. I'm extremely jet-lagged, and I'm having a fever dream about information that I probably shouldn't know, but also might not actually be happening in real life, or it might all just be a dream. We'll get into that, though.
Yeah.
We're jumping back to going all the way back to 1999 with Audition.
Dun, dun, dun.
Number 165 on our list, an 82% Rotten Tomatoes score. Had you seen Audition before?
Yes, I have.
1 second. Before we get into that, I do want to tease that we have some housekeeping we need to address, which we will do at the end of this episode because it's really interesting, and it does affect what our next movie is going to be.
Ooh.
So listen to the end. Salesman, natural born salesman.
Listen to our show.
Yes. What's your history with Audition?
So being the kind of giant all-encompassing nerd that I am, I was one of those kids in the 90s to early to mid 2000s who got really into like anime and Japanese horror. Like I saw The Ring in theaters when I was probably too young to see The Ring in theaters.
The American one?
Yes.
Sure.
I saw that one first, and it was like the first scary movie that I really remember seeing, like the first like horror movie I remember seeing in theaters.
That's a good one.
Right?
I'm 5 years older than you, so I was a little bit older, but even still, that one sticks with you.
It's a good first scary movie in a movie theater experience, but it kind of launched me into this idea that like, oh, there are other movies made, because I found out pretty soon after that, thanks internet, that it was based on a Japanese movie first, and it was like, oh wait, and I remember kind of going down that rabbit hole of watching like Ringu and a couple others, and I stumbled upon Audition.
That must have been quite a left turn.
Yeah, because it was definitely a few years after it came out, so it wasn't 1999. I was not like 10 or 11 years old. I was a little bit older than that.
Yeah.
But that, and then that in turn launched me into so not to get ahead of us, but like this movie is based on a book.
Have you read the book?
I have not read this book, but I have read other books by the same author.
Interesting.
And they are, in some ways, more fucked up than this.
Really? Because they actually just covered this movie on Joe Bob's Last Drive-In on Shudder, which is a show I'm a big fan of. And he mentioned the book, but I couldn't, and I didn't know it was based on a book, but I couldn't quite get a read on whether or not the book was as messed up as the movie, because I think in my head I was like, oh, okay, well, the most of the freaky stuff is probably from the director and maybe not the book so much. But if this guy's other books are equally as messed up, then I guess maybe it's all in there. Yeah,
I think there's one. I think how did our friend Laura refer to it as the scene?
Sure. Yes.
Like that one, the scene. Everyone should know what we're talking about if you've seen this movie. That was Takashi Miike, the director, but there's other stuff I think in the book that was not in the movie that is pretty messed up.
Interesting.
Yeah. What about you? Have you seen this one before?
I had. This was one I actually avoided for a long time.
Really?
Yeah.
That surprises me.
Well, it's kind of like, to me, the getting into horror movies is like getting into amusement park rides.
Okay.
And I feel like there's always like a level that you think you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And then there's the other ones where it's like, oh my God, this roller coaster goes 200 feet in the air and then it goes down like more than 90 degrees and it's a straight drop. And I'm like, you know what? I appreciate that it's out there. I don't really know if I need to see this. And Audition was one of those movies where it's like, I like the stuff that I like, and then this one's on the fringe, and it's like, oh my God, it's so messed up. It's the end. Oh my God. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Do I really need to see this?
The answer was yes.
And then I watched it, and it's actually, it's a lot different than I thought it was going to be, frankly.
Yeah.
And it's pretty legitimately a good movie.
Yes.
Like, it's not, I think I came across this after the point where the quote unquote torture porn era started.
Yes.
Which we can talk about because this was kind of influential on that. And I think I never really cared for those types of movies, and I think I equated this with that, and I was like, well, I saw Hostel. I don't really need to see. Little did I know that this is... I saw Hostel should never be an excuse to not see anything ever, because that movie sucks.
Yeah, it sucks for... It sucks even as an example of its subgenre.
Yeah, but
This episode's not about that, though.
No, and hopefully none of them are episodes
Hopefully
ever will be.
never will be.
I apologize to everyone out there who loves Hostel. You're awful people. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to play the trailer, and then we're going to come back and talk about Audition.
Audition やろ息子に言われたんです最近しょぼくれてるんで再婚でもしたがってあさみ本当にオーディションするのか何もお前の再婚相手を探すためだけにオーディションするわけじゃないよ山崎あさみです俺はもう決めた
あの女を見たのかあの女の体に触ったのか
返してくれなきゃ嫌よこの人はいけません言葉なんか嘘だけど痛みだけは信じれるのよあなたは私の全部にはなってくれないのねキリキリキリキリキリキリキリキリ私もいけないでしょキリキリキリキリキリ痛い
Okay, Audition. As I said, number 165 on our list, 82% Rotten Tomatoes score. Directed by Takashi Miike, written by Daisuke Tengan from a novel by Ryo
Murakami.
Ryo Murakami, thank you. Please jump in if I'm going to ruin a lot of these.
I won't do much better. It's fine.
Starring Ryo Ishibashi, Eihi Shiina, it's either Sawaki or Sawaki. I'm not sure where the accent goes. Jun Kunimura, and Gangu the male dog with curiously prominent nipples. Makes me wonder whether or not he is actually a she. Amanda, what happens in Audition?
This disturbing Japanese thriller follows Aoyama, a widower who decides to start dating again. Aided by a film producer friend, Aoyama uses auditions for a fake production to function as a dating service. When Aoyama becomes intrigued by the withdrawn, gorgeous Asami, they begin a relationship. However, he begins to realize that Asami isn't as reserved as she appears to be, leading to gradually increased tension and a harrowing climax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes this movie sound a lot more tame.
Yes.
Actually,
excuse me. There's a lot of things in this movie that seem like it's going to be a lot more tame, and then you hit like the last 20 minutes or so.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Well, Clay.
Mm-hmm.
Some things you'll find in this movie include the worst wingman idea ever.
Yeah. Never listen to your misogynistic friend about what you should do if you're looking to get out in the dating scene.
Looking for love in all the wrong places. Closely related to the first one.
Yes.
A literal bag man.
Yes. Or what was left of him anyway.
Oh, Jesus. And the most stylish murder outfit I've ever seen.
Yes. Yeah. It's nice because it seemed very tight. Like, because it's all rubber. Like, it's like this rubber smock with like these tight rubber bands.
It's almost like a butcher's apron.
Yeah.
And like above the elbow gloves. And I love it so much because it's like very reflective of her as a character, where she's very like, everything she does is so intentional. Her whole look and like physical presentation is very specific and intentional and on purpose. And even her like kill kit outfit is the same, where it's very like it is tailored to her. It is like very like no one else could just like put that on. That's very like she clearly was like, no, I want it to like fit nicely at the waist, and I want the gloves to do this, and like it's like, oh yeah, you put a lot of thought into this.
It has to be functional for cutting off feet and tongues and ears and paralyzing guys, but also stylish enough that people can be weirdly pervy about it if they want to.
Yeah, look, she has a specific aesthetic that she's trying to maintain, and I think she does it well.
I think so too. Yes. So yes, Audition. I had seen this only once before, and I don't think I realized this the first time. But the first like 30 minutes of this movie is basically a romantic comedy. Or at least like a romantic drama.
Yep.
And we were watching it last night, and I was saying like if they remade this in America, it would be like it's basically the movie Hitch with Kevin James and Will Smith, except it takes a very dark turn.
Yeah, it veers.
Yeah. But I definitely remember not being ready for that because they set up this story about this just lonely widower.
Yep.
Who is, you know, he's middle-aged. Yeah. I would say. Yeah. And he's just looking for a new wife, and it's fairly benign, the setup, and like the gimmick of it is very romantic comedy silliness, where it's like we're gonna hold an audition, we're gonna find you a wife, and it's like okay, sure.
Yeah, this is like only a couple steps away from like a movie like Pretty Woman or She's All That, where it's like yeah, you have to go out and like find this woman, and it's gonna be this like engineered situation, but in the end you're going to actually fall in love with each other, and it's going to be so wonderful.
Yeah, or it's like in the end his buddy is played by like Dylan McDermott or something, who's a little bit older and a little bit you know, kind of silver foxy.
Yeah, but plays slightly sleazy pretty well.
Yeah, and ultimately he ends up falling in love with the woman who works at his office because she's been there the whole time, and you know, or it turns out that she was one of the auditioners and trying to I don't know. It could get weird.
Yeah, there would have been some whole thing where it's like they used to go to school together, and she went and got hot, and now she's back.
Right. What it wouldn't end in is him having his feet cut off. But yeah, it's really fascinating because it's a fairly benign setup until you really kind of look at the setup they're presenting you, which is one of an older man who is very much looking for like a trophy wife, not trophy wife, but like
I think a trophy wife is the perfect term for it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he talks about how he wants her to have like accomplishments in some way.
As Meredith said, in the Jane Austen tradition of accomplished women.
Yes, where it's like, well, she plays an instrument, or she was a dancer, or she's had some sort of, you know, like career accomplishment that she can be proud of and feel good about. And it's like, okay. And my favorite thing is that they talk about that the friend whose name I'm blanking on, starts with a Y. Was it Yoshikawa?
Sure.
Anyway, he's like, well, you want a young girl, like you want a younger girl or woman, however he phrases it, right? And Aoyama says, no, I want a mature woman. And then the pool of applicants is 20 to 35-year-olds.
Yes, it's the
So Clay, I still make the cut.
Yes, it's
I have a chance.
The porno definition of mature woman.
Yeah, but it's this very strange like he's like he wants her to be polished and pretty and have quote unquote accomplishments.
Yeah.
But he even says at some point, I want her to be like the perfect wife. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect what, like specifically perfect wife.
Yes.
Not the perfect person to be his wife, you know.
Right, right.
And it's interesting because they I think the stuff that they do here as far as these like gender roles and relationships go is actually kind of fairly subtle. Yeah. Because you've got that scene where they're kind of talking and like I said, it feels like a romantic comedy kind of setup, so it doesn't totally stand out at how kind of fucked up this is.
Yeah.
From the get-go. But they've got that scene where they're at the bar.
Yeah.
And they're talking about how the young kids are too loud and so it's basically two older guys who are just want to date younger girls.
But the interesting thing about that is it's a table full of young women.
Right.
And one of the men calls them common.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Like that's not the right kind of young woman. They're too loud. They're too boisterous. That's not appropriate. That's not proper.
And it's an interesting
Where
contrast.
are all the nice girls is what they say.
Yes. Yeah. It's an interesting contrast with his son and his son's kind of girlfriend there.
Yeah.
Because the father there is going out of his way to find this perfect woman.
Uh-huh.
And the son is like, I saw her at the bus stop. She seemed interested in dinosaurs.
She was pretty and she was nice, so I talked to her. And
Not
now
to
we're
mention-
looking at dinosaurs. And
Not
it's
to
like,
mention the
good for
fact.
you.
Not to mention the fact that he says that to his dad in front of her.
Which I kind of love because it means he
Yeah.
probably already said it to her. Like, hey, you're really pretty. Do you want to come over and look at my dinosaur models? And
Yeah.
she was like, you know what? Yes, I do.
Because they're both 5-year-olds, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
but no, like it's a very different kind of relationship to or dynamic with women than the older guys have.
That's a really good point that there's like not just the sort of more apparent like gender divide happening in this movie, but there's a generational one as well. And like the son even makes the comment that his dad's new girlfriend, when Aoyama tells him, he says she's 24, and the son says that's closer to my age.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is this interesting, like, not only is there the sort of pitting this older man versus a woman, it's a much younger woman.
And his buddy there says, too, he's like, find someone you'd want your son to date. At some point when they're talking about...
I missed that one. Oh, my God.
He says something similar to that where he's like, find someone that would be good for your son. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's just, it's such a disarming setup that is... the beginning of a very slow burn. It's a much slower burn than I remember.
Me too. Yeah, because I haven't watched this in a very, very long time. And I remember. I mean, I feel like this is one of those movies where you remember the crazy scenes,
Right.
But I had not remembered how sort of like gradual and methodical the kind of descent into the weirdness is, and then how there's that moment where it just sort of all snaps into place and everything goes batshit insane.
Yeah, because like for the first, I actually looked at the runtime, and I think he goes to the dance studio, which is really when things start going.
Yeah.
At about like just past the hour mark.
Oh, wow.
Or maybe like almost even like an hour and 10 minutes.
And this movie isn't that long.
It's not that long. I think I want to say it's probably around an hour and a half, an hour and 40, I think.
Yeah.
And so it's not like nothing's happening before that, but it is a very gradual lead up to, bag guy aside, where, you know, obviously you have that scene where the bag moves and which works every time.
Oh my God. And you don't know the first time you see the bag and the first time the bag moves, you have no idea what's in it.
Right.
Which I think is so great and so effective of like what's in it is very horrifying. But for me, the best scene is always that first scene where she's in the first scene where you see her childhood apartment. Because that's what that room is. It's the same apartment when they do the flashbacks when she's a little girl.
Oh, sure. Okay.
That's why it looks all ruined and fallen apart. And so it's her in her childhood apartment, and she's just been like sitting on the floor, not moving for days, waiting for the phone call. And then the phone rings and the bag just like jumps halfway across the floor.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's in it. And it's just so effectively scary. The not knowing and the mystery of like, what the fuck is that is so good.
It's also really well like staged because it doesn't stand out. Like the bag doesn't stand out.
That's a good point.
It's not moving and that room is all kind of the same color.
Yeah, it's like a very beige palette. Yeah.
And you know, she's there, she's positioned in the kind of prominent foreground and the phone's there. And so you're not really paying. And they show you a scene beforehand with the bag in it where nothing happens.
Right.
So your brain might clock it, but you're not expecting anything to happen.
You're focused on her.
Right.
Yeah.
The bag becomes part of the background.
Right.
Until they come back to it, and then it flips over and you go,
the other thing I just wanted to say before we got too deep into the insanity part, about this gradual opening and the sort of slow burn beginning of this movie. Like, you and I pointed out a bunch of the things that Aoyama and his friend say that come off as like misogynistic.
Oh, sure.
But it's not like an hour and 10 minutes of that.
No.
You know, like those kind of throwaway lines are like, at times kind of you don't fully process them for a second, and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, gross.
Right.
Or like, even watching it this time, I had to kind of remind myself, like, because I remember in my head, like watching it this time thinking like, well, I mean, was 1999. you know what I mean? And then I was like, no, you have to remember that like this is even then not okay.
It's 1999. It's not 1910. You know.
right. But it's so tempting at this point when you encounter a movie
Sure.
that you could easily say is more than 20 years old, that you're like, oh well, I mean, things are going to be a little dated. What do you expect?
Mm-hmm.
And in this, it's like, no, those subtle kind of throwaway comments where it's, you know, just the guys talking at the bar,
Mm-hmm.
like those are meaningful, but they don't beat you over the head with it.
Right.
It's just kind of like, all right, so his friend's a little sleazy, and okay, he's a widower, so he's been out of the dating world for a while. Give the guy a break. Like, it's so easy, even as an audience member, to make those excuses for their behavior that like you sort of accidentally start becoming complicit a little bit in like the way they treat people, where you're like, well, I mean, maybe this is gonna make sense.
Yeah, and I also think it's not done that way by accident, you know, because
Exactly.
this movie is very much about I would say it's about gender dynamics or sexual dynamics and treating women the right way or treating anybody the right way. You know, there's a lot of that at play.
Yeah.
So that stuff is not just in there. I'm not saying you're saying this is why, but it's
How
just
dare you?
it's not just in there for the sake of like, well, it's 1999. It's not in there the way like you would hear certain unsavory words thrown around in like a movie from 1983 or something.
Right.
If say a homosexual character should show up.
Right.
It's not just in there to, as you know, part of the language of the time. It's like it's specifically they are doing this stuff on purpose.
Yes.
To set these characters up, I think, in a way where he probably doesn't even recognize what he's doing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's just, you know, it's just two people talking, two older guys talking about younger people. I mean, that's all Twitter is people, older people talking shit about younger people and vice versa.
That's all Facebook is.
Yeah.
No, I think that's absolutely right, or I agree with that completely. And I think that's one thing that makes this movie really interesting, is that you can recognize the things that Aoyama believes and says and the ways he acts that are like not okay.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a level of like, he does not understand that they're not okay.
Right.
He is extremely earnest in a lot of ways. Like he's not an overt villain or like an obvious misogynist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not an abusive guy. Like, seems like he really loved his first wife. You note that in our things you'll find in this movie, we did not include questionable parenting.
That's true. Yeah.
Because he seems like a good dad.
Yeah, his son seemed to come out pretty good.
Yeah, and he's like, you know, I made dinner, I did that. Like, he's not a bad person. He's not a bad guy because of his attitudes towards women. He just has poor attitudes towards women,
right,
that are like have been like normalized around him. So it's just like he's not this cartoonish villain. He's not somebody that you're like, oh well, he did this horrible thing, so I'm like rooting for Asami to get her like wire saw out and just start going to town on him.
Yeah, it's interesting because you could argue that if the main character were his friend, it would be more of an overt kind of, this is an unsavory character who has this coming.
Yep.
But I think you can make the argument that Aoyama doesn't really do anything wrong in this, like large scale wrong. Like he doesn't, well, we can get into whether or not the last half of this movie actually happens in a bit, but he doesn't ghost her or anything.
Yeah.
He's actively trying to pursue a relationship with her.
The thing I would say he does wrong is that he begins a relationship with her under false pretenses.
Sure,
and he never corrects them.
Well, who hasn't?
But even then, it's this sort of like it's definitely there's enough ambiguity in like, yes, I think most people, I hope, would agree that the way he met Asami is wrong and messed up and not at all in any way okay. However, I think we can all safely say that her reaction is a little outsized.
A bit, yes. Yeah, because it's like, I do find it to be, I don't know if it's a direct, like, I keep coming back to this romantic comedy thing. I don't know if it's meant to be some sort of commentary on that, because it very much is like, it's something.
Like it has to on some point. I mean, even the way they score parts of this movie, where it's like that sort of like, you know, very rom-com-y music in the background at different points, and there's lots of like soft focus images of her at different points.
The actual audition sequence is like, it's like a slapstick comedy sequence, you know. It's like the speed dating sequence from 40-Year-Old Virgin, you know, where he's seeing all these different people and they're asking all these kind of wild out there questions, and they're getting one person shows up as a cheerleader, you know, one person just starts taking her clothes off.
Yep.
You know, it's a very kind of silly sequence.
Right. It's played for like comedy at the same time as it's played for like the sort of like earnestness of like different people coming and trying really hard to get this job.
Yeah. And I also say he goes about it the wrong way, because if you wanna make sure you don't really look at any of those entrants, because otherwise you're gonna fall in love with the girl off the bat, and then you're gonna be blinded to everybody. There's probably a much better person for him in that group.
I would say I'd say it's a safe bet saying that there's a much better person than Asami, the woman who's murdered a bunch of people in that group.
Arguably, literally anybody else.
Yes, yeah. He probably could have like married the best friend, and that would have been better, even though he's a sleaze.
And I wonder, that seems like part of it too, is there's this weird kind of I don't know if it's they're setting him up as being oblivious, or if the idea here is that he is being damaging to people in a way that he doesn't realize he's doing it, because they have that scene with the secretary or the other woman who works in his office.
Yes. You sexist. You assume she's a secretary.
She looks like she types fast.
She's got the strong typing fingers.
Yeah. But they have that scene in the elevator where it's not, there's no lead up to it. She just comes out and she says, "I'm getting married," and she's clearly like emotional, and he's very much not. And there is some implication that something either happened between them, or there was some sort of like James Bond Moneypenny situation going on. Yeah. And we find out later that he did sleep with her once, and then they never kind of, it sounds like he probably maybe ghosted her or shut down or something. He's
like the big cheese at his office.
Right.
He's like it's his company or something. I think even the housekeeper says like, well, you set up your own company. So he's, you know, the boss's 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 boss. And that isn't, it's interesting because we all kind of picked up on that when we were watching it the other night and commented on it like, wait, did they sleep together? Are we supposed to know that? Are we not? And it's like, there's this, it leaves open for most of the movie this feeling of like, maybe he is just a little bit of a bumbling, kind of oblivious guy. Maybe she's always had feelings for him and he just was so oblivious he didn't notice. And that could have 100% been the case until we get to that moment where it's like his dream sequence. So it's his mind. And it says, you know, it has her say, you know, we slept together and I thought something was going to come of it, but you never pursued it any further.
Yeah. And so I think it goes a pretty long way to kind of subtly set up this guy that he is damaging in a way that he doesn't even if he does realize it, he doesn't care, but he probably doesn't really realize it.
Yeah, the word I keep thinking of is it's mundane. Like his behavior and like the shitty way he treats some of the people in his life and behaves towards some of the women he's known is just like a very mundane, everyday kind of shittiness. He's not like an exceptionally bad guy doing exceptionally bad things. He's a fairly average guy doing mundanely bad things.
Right. And like there's even towards the end in the big set piece torture sequence at the end, he says something to the effect of like, "Please don't hurt my son," and she's like, "See, you said you'd love nobody but me, and clearly you lied. So how could I ever try?" Like, so it's that kind of mundane sort of like you're saying, mundane sort of damaging nature that he where he's doing stuff, he's hurting people. He might not intentionally do it, but he's still doing it, and he's not really being responsible for the damage that he's causing.
Yeah. It's like he's sort of just, he has a certain level of, I hesitate to use the word privilege because I feel like it's become such a buzzword that it's practically meaningless.
Sure.
But he does in the world he inhabits. Like, he's a man of a certain age. He's well established. It's clear he has money. He's living in, I think it's supposed to be in Tokyo.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, regardless, he's living in a city in Japan and has a pretty nice apartment.
Yeah.
Like, places in Japan are tiny, and he's got like a big place for just him and his son.
And there is a little bit of like wealth stuff going on too.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
with
he pays that housekeeper. Yeah.
And the housekeeper kind of like goes out of her way to talk about how she has to work because her husband's like doesn't or something.
Or he works but not. I don't know. It was. She was like, "Oh, if only I'd met somebody like you, who then I wouldn't have to be doing this."
And we were talking about it at the time as whether or not he is supposed to come off as oblivious.
Yeah.
But I think the more I find this movie really fascinating because the more I think about it, the more interesting it becomes.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think none of these issues or questions are like straightforward answers. Like things are very much shades of gray.
Yeah, because if we want to get into the stuff that happens in the second half, he starts. There's a very hard break where he and Asami go on vacation. They sleep together for the first time, and then he wakes up and she's gone. And then from that point on, the ball just starts rolling, and he starts finding out all this stuff about her that's really freaky. And then
she definitely drugged him that night, right?
Possibly. We can get into that in a second.
Okay, sorry.
And which all of this leads up to this this grand torture sequence, which is preceded by this dream that he has after he's been drugged, and he falls over, and he has this dream. And in this dream, it's very much a like all of the subtextual things going on in his head kind of happening at the same time. And it includes a lot of information about Asami that there's no way he could have possibly known. The guy in the bag, the fact that she feeds him her own puke, which apparently, at least in that first shot, was actually her own puke. That's the claim anyway. But not the one that he ate, but I think the one she comes out.
Yeah, she walks over with it.
According to IMDb trivia, the dog bowl of vomit fed to Asami's prisoner is in fact the actual vomit of the actress.
Good for her.
Miike claims that she is a method actress and insisted on doing this. So whether or not he's just pulling your leg, I don't know.
I choose to believe it.
Yeah. But like that's stuff that there's no way he could know. There's no way he could know what the inside of that her room looks like. He starts seeing these visions of her as a child being burned by the guy in the wheelchair from the dance studio.
Yes.
Who may or may not be her stepfather. There's like a lot of things going on. And I had after we watched the movie, I was kind of like, that dream does a lot of narrative lifting that I don't really know if it earns, because it's and then I hadn't even considered this, but apparently there's a reading of the movie where everything that happens from the point where she has left him it is not actually happening. It's all part of a like fever dream that he's having, which is accented by the point in that dream where he wakes up and he's back in the room with her and then he falls back to sleep. And as he falls back to sleep, he's pulled back into the torture sequence.
I think that's interesting in terms of like an interesting almost like thought exercise for how you approach the movie, but I don't really buy it.
So you think everything that happens actually is happening?
Like in terms of her coming into the house and torturing him and cutting his foot off and stabbing him with needles?
And him finding the guy in the wheelchair and him hearing the story about the guy with his tongue and his ears cut off and all that kind of stuff.
Well, so he does some of that before he gets drugged, right?
Isn't
it that
that happens
he goes
before
out,
the dream?
He goes and he checks her references.
But the reading of is that everything from the point where they have slept together and he wakes up and she's gone, from that point is all not actually happening. It's all in his head.
See, I don't buy that.
Yeah.
I don't buy that. I think he does go and he tries to find the bar and he finds out that there was, the murder there and the tongue and the 3 fingers in the ear.
Mm-hmm.
I think he goes to the ballet studio and meets the man in the wheelchair who may or may not have been her abusive stepfather.
With a jacket that I don't know what the hell that jacket is.
I don't know.
I was trying to make out what's written on it.
Words all over it, but I don't know what the words are.
I saw beef on there, and I thought I saw beer. Maybe I just saw the same word twice, but I thought for a second it was like a Coors Light jacket or something.
It
but
could have been.
I don't know what it is.
Yeah. But no, I think that stuff happens. I think, I think the parts that are dreams are once he gets home and he drinks the drugged whiskey and then he passes out and it brings him on the crazy, like he's in her childhood house and they're back like seeing the flashbacks of her as a kid and like I think that stuff is the dream, but I think she actually comes and tortures him.
So how would you, Amanda, writer of this film?
Yes.
How do you reconcile all the stuff that he sees about her regarding the bad? Because we know that the bad guy does exist.
Yes.
I guess, because it happens before that point. And we see in the bad guy scene, we see what her apartment looks like.
Yes.
But how would he be able to, or am I being too literal in my reading? Like there's.
I mean, so I think kind of the point of it is that it's not entirely a movie based in reality. Like I think this movie is a much more like a movie where the ideas and the concepts matter more than the literal.
Sure.
Like, how has she gotten away if she's like cut off all these dudes' feet, like killed all these people? How has she gotten away with it for this long? Like, how did she manage to drug and kill 2 people when she clearly weighs like 92 pounds? Like,
right. Yeah.
I don't think we're supposed to be taking it super literally, but at the same time, I mean, I'm sure you could invent some sort of like, there's a psychic element to it, or like she's not even really a human. She's more like some sort of embodiment of like the rage of wronged women. Like you could go down any of those routes, but I don't think it actually matters. Like I don't think it matters.
Probably not.
How this information got conveyed, just that this is her background and this is what he is now going through.
Yeah, I think the bummer that comes along with, well, or maybe you can think of it as being clever, I don't know, that comes along with the reading that none of it's actually happening, is it's basically then turns the movie into, oh my God, I just asked this girl I've known for 2 weeks to marry me. Yeah. What if she's an insane killer?
Right. I think it just it robs that reading where it's like they have a romantic weekend together. He goes to sleep and has a nightmare because he's like second guessing whether or not this is a good idea. Just makes this a movie about a man who had a midlife crisis and is going to marry a much younger woman,
right? Which
is significantly more boring than what this movie actually is.
I do still find that kind of interesting because I don't know if you've ever seen. Have you seen Eyes Wide Shut?
Oh God, yeah.
Oh, I love Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut is very much like watching a guy have a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
it's such an interesting movie. But so like I do find that slightly interesting, but it does take away any real meaning from a lot of it, because
and it just defangs Asami completely,
Right,
where she really is just this meek little, like, Meredith kept joking, like, can somebody please help her get her shoulders down from around her ears? Like, my back is hurting for her back. Like, yeah, and that would just be such a letdown.
And it also, if that's the case, if this is all a what am I doing sort of fever dream, he's not really learning anything, because it's not refuting the path he took to get to that point.
Right.
Whereas this movie, it seems like it's very much refuting the path that he took to get to this point. Because if it's just him having a dream, he has no reservations. Well, once he wakes up, maybe he will, maybe he won't. But you have to extrapolate out that if it's just a dream, he's going to wake up, he's probably going to marry her, and things are just going to, that's just how it's going to be.
Right, so or he wakes up and he unceremoniously breaks up with this young woman who he just proposed to, and like breaks her heart.
Right. Yeah.
When she's already had this like tragic backstory of having been a professional dancer and then had to stop because she got injured.
Right. So I think I think it's sort of like you're saying, it defangs her, and I think it defangs anything that they're trying to say about the gender dynamics or the way that he's treating people or damaging people.
Yeah. Yeah.
There apparently is, we can call it evidence. We'll say it's evidence to back up that reading, because I guess the filming style changes at certain points where it goes between handheld and static camera. I think the idea is that the static stuff is all a dream, but I didn't read into it that deeply. But it is one of those things where it's like, I feel like it's on the table. I'd like that they don't say either way. You can kind of pull from it what you want. But I think it's very much up to the viewer to make their own decision about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And my personal decision is that, like, I do believe, I mean, obviously I think some of the stuff he sees is a dream. I don't know how he knows what he knows, but I don't buy the reading.
You want his foot cut off.
Yes.
You don't want him. You want him to be scarred for life.
I want to take his foot off.
Take his foot off and replace it with John Travolta's foot.
Yes.
No one will be able to tell the difference.
Yes, then they're the same person.
Yes, and he'll do the same. Rubs
okay.
the foot down his wife's face, and that's how she knows it's not his real foot.
Can I just say I literally laughed out loud when Asami cuts his foot off and then like giggles and casually tosses it over her shoulder into the sliding door. That was hilarious.
So that final sequence. Well, did you want to talk about anything else leading up to that, like regarding the dance studio stuff?
Yeah, I mean a little bit about some of that stuff. So one thing I think we kind of noted the other night was that there are these weird moments where they're out on dates, Asami and Aoyama, and it's like the settings around them sometimes change, like without really any like noticeable warning. Like people, like they're sitting in a very full cafe, and during the same conversation, all of a sudden the cafe is empty.
Right.
And I think that's interesting because it can be read in a couple ways, which is like, you could go back to that kind of like, is this really happening reading? But it's also like, are we supposed to look at this in the rom-com way where it's like, they've been talking for so long that the night's over and everybody's left, the place is like shutting down? Or is it to make them, to kind of symbolize how there's nothing else exists for the two of them than each other? But I think what it does is it kind of adds to that questionable, like, dreamlike state that comes in and out during this movie, and adds to your sense of like unreality, or like it makes everything a little more off-putting. It makes Asami a little more like, okay, what is going on here, and I think that's really interesting, because it's another one of those things where there's not a big deal made out of it.
Yeah.
It's not like there's like a jarring noise or like a weird flash of light and then, oh, look, they're in a different restaurant. It's just like, no, in one part of the conversation they're here and then the next they're over here.
Yeah. It's I think that stuff, that sequence works nicely to kind of use that sort of romantic comedy language to build that the relationship between them.
Yeah. And like, oh, okay.
No, good.
Oh, I was gonna kind of change the subject a little bit, but
no, yeah, it's I agree with all that. I think they do that stuff all the time in other movies, and you never really even think about it. Like, two people having a conversation while they're walking.
Yep.
Cut to a different location. It's just the next part of the conversation. It's
right.
like, well, what did they talk about between on the
yeah,
car
like it
ride
definitely
across
like
town?
took 20 minutes to get here. What else did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that, and then I think that the heavy implication to outright proof that the ballet school pianist or stepfather, I think I'm just going to say I think it's her stepfather,
Sure.
was like sexually abusing her as well, or getting some sort of sexual gratification out of forcing her to dance for him or hurting her. I think that adds a disturbing level to the whole movie and to Asami in particular. And I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm impressed with the way it's done, because there's definitely a scene where like you can very overtly see him like jerking off while she dances. But it's not thrown in your face right away. You're sort of given these like hints that he has this grotesque fixation on her and has since she was a little girl, even in the scenes where it's not either a flashback or a dream. Like when Aoyama actually goes to the school and says, I have questions about Asami, and the man in the wheelchair starts going like, have you met her? Have you touched her? Have you made love to her? Like, it's just
normal questions.
Just things you ask a stranger who comes in asking about your estranged stepdaughter. But I don't know.
Great job on the fake feet, by the way. I don't know who made those. But
yeah, those things are hideous. They're great.
Yeah, I feel like
attached
he
to like
made
wooden
those,
boards.
They look like he made them himself. And like
or like
these was all I had was this. All I had was this old mannequin and a couple pieces of wood, and I did what I could.
But it's weird because the feet look almost like they're dried out.
Yeah.
Versions of real feet.
Yeah, they're pretty gross.
Like I don't know, the whole foot thing.
I left them in the dryer.
Yeah.
They're the only pair I have.
They got buried in kitty litter and just sucked all the moisture right out.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole foot thing is like really interesting to me, the preoccupation with like
do you think
the feet.
Do you think that
the foot fetish, if you will?
I feel like you have to one of the quotes from Quentin Tarantino was like, "This is an absolute masterpiece," and maybe it was all the foot stuff. I don't know, but is it unreasonable to extrapolate out that her stepfather, and maybe they said this and I just missed it, is responsible for whatever happened to her, like busting her hip so she couldn't dance anymore? Because it seems like that's all like the feet thing. Says to me something was done to her which took away the thing that she loves, which is dancing. Yeah. And now it took her feet away. Yeah. So now she's taking everybody else's feet away.
I mean, yeah, there's just, I think that's a fair reading. I think that's a really interesting point. I think all of the preoccupation with feet, like a dancer's feet are their tool. And I think you can even get really meta with it and say stepfather.
Sure.
But but I think there's this aspect to it too, where I think Asami even says it, that it, I don't know if she says if I cut off your feet or if I take your feet, but she pretty much says, but then you can't leave.
Sure. Yep.
So there's like an element of it makes you dependent on me. Like it makes it's the easiest way I think she sees for subjugating these different men in her life. Like incapacitating them so that they rely on her and they can't, operate in the world without her.
I don't know why she need to go after Aoyama at all, because she seems pretty content with the bad guy. Like, he's there, he's not going anywhere. Maybe he's getting old, and she needs a replacement or something. But
I mean, I know you're being like half facetious, but
always,
always and all the way. But I think for her there is this level of the weekend they go away together and she gets naked and they're gonna sleep together, and she says, "You have to promise to love me and only me," and he says, "Yes, of course." And I think she's probably just keeps looking for that.
Sure.
Like, she keeps, in her own psychotic way, being like, maybe this time it's true.
Yeah.
Maybe
I thought you were different.
Yeah, and that's very much her thing. Like, maybe this time he's the one. And then I think her sneaking into his house is her looking for that kind of proof that, like, it's true this time. And then the minute she sees the picture of the dead wife, it's like, oh, you're a liar like the rest of them, and now
I'm gonna kill your dog.
I'm gonna kill your dog and your son, and I'm gonna cut your feet off.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's a very proportionate reaction to the whole situation, I think.
Do you think he deserves it?
No.
No. Like I said,
I am totally like a horrible witchy crone feminist monster. I will never deny that. But no, he does not deserve to be tortured with needles under his eyes and his like remaining family murdered and his feet cut off. No.
Yeah, no,
He maybe deserves like a good solid punch in the face.
Yeah.
And to never have sex again.
I was just saying that because I was thinking about how we were saying, well, if it was the friend is a lot more overtly awful. And so I think there's another version of this movie where it's more of like a
vengeance tale.
Yes.
Yeah. Where she's this like avenging angel figure for like wronged women.
Yeah. Which, I mean, honestly, you probably still can read it that way.
But I like that you can't. I like that it's not just that obvious. Like that's like an angle or a facet of it, but it's not like the whole story.
Yeah, it like that reading of it I find interesting because it is very much kind of almost like a fairy tale in that sense where it's like, this is just what she does.
Yes.
And you failed the test. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how badly you failed the test.
Yep.
You still got the third question wrong. So you're going to get launched into the pit of unending sorrow or whatever.
Right. It's sort of like, yeah, that's a really interesting way. Like what do sirens do in mythology? They lure men to their deaths. Like that's what they do.
Right.
Like what does Baba Yaga do? She like steals babies.
Is that the one with the house with the chicken
the chicken
feet?
legs.
That's fun.
Yeah, she is fun. She's great.
This movie has been received very differently depending on which continent it was played in. In Europe, it was seen as a feminist film.
Okay.
In America, it was seen as a misogynist film.
Huh.
Do you have a read on either of those?
I mean, like so many other things, not to be boring or try to worm my way out of answering, but I feel like with so many other things with this movie, it's really hard to just say it's this or that. Yeah. It's like, it's definitely kind of both, but I would lean more towards it's like an anti-misogynist film rather than a feminist film. Yeah. If that makes sense. Like, this movie is clearly not presenting Asami as like righteous and correct and well-adjusted.
Right.
Like, she's not I'm trying to think of like a good like vengeful woman or vengeful she's not the Inigo Montoya of this movie where it's like, you killed my father, prepare to die. Like, that's not what's happening here. Yeah. But at the same time, I think this movie is a little bit about a sort of garden variety misogynist getting more than his comeuppance. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's those questions are, I find them to be unfair.
Yeah.
Not just with this movie, but in a lot of movies, because like, I feel like you can tell very easily if a story or a work is made with feminist or misogynistic intentions versus if it is a film or a story that has feminist and misogynistic elements in it.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, yeah, it's misogynist in that the guys are being assholes. There's misogynistic stuff in it that they're doing. I don't think it's Takashi Miike taking a misogynistic stand about like, man, women, right? You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me that would be anyone's read on this movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it kind of makes me wonder, like if the message you got out of this movie was, ugh, bitches, am I right? Then I feel like you didn't really watch the movie.
Yeah, I mean, it must be a feminine. Never mind. I was
Yeah.
gonna get myself in trouble. But yeah, I think this movie really blurs the line really well, where it is presenting these things that are unsavory elements from both sides of the equation.
Yeah.
And they're not. I think you can read it how you want to read it, and I would agree with you where it's like I think it's more of an anti-misogynist thing than anything else.
Right. Right, because I mean, you could go back and say most of the abuse that Asami suffered, that seems to be the thing that really pushed her over the edge, was from her stepfather. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like this is the evil that misogyny does to men and women. Like,
yeah. Sure.
You know, she has been damaged in such a way that she is now completely disconnected from reality and a violent psychotic killer. But misogyny has also damaged Aoyama in a way that he can't even tell that he's not having a real relationship with a real person.
Yeah.
Like, it has stripped him of his ability to truly... He's also disconnected from a reality in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it kind of goes to show, like, how do both of them end up? Like,
not great.
Half dead or completely dead on the floor.
Yeah.
Like, it's like nobody wins.
Yeah, I think it's an attempt to label something. It's like you don't have to choose. This movie doesn't have to choose sides.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a great story.
Yeah.
And told very well in a very interesting way that can be. Is it misogynist or is it feminist? The answer is yes. I would say, you know?
And the answer is also no.
Yes, the answer is also no.
God, yeah, it's just, and it really does, like, trying to pigeonhole it into one or the other really minimizes the things it does so well.
Right.
Which are like, you know, there's something wrong with this woman the whole movie. You're not quite sure what it is or where it's going to end up or what you're going to find out, but like, she's just this like docile, soft-spoken, like demure little shoulders way up.
Mm-hmm. Always,
like,
almost always dressed in white too.
Yes.
You know, except for that like red shawl thing she's got.
Yeah, that was just kind of an interesting choice. But like the gradual reveal of just how deeply fucked up she is so well done.
Yeah.
You know, like it's not she's unsettling the whole movie, and he's so blinded by her, by how beautiful she is and how, you know, quiet and grateful she seems to be. She's such a dream to him that he can't see, but you as you're watching it can. And so it's a little bit of that like don't go down there feeling that you have when you watch horror movies of like, don't go in the basement, don't split up, like the whole time you're just like, don't do this, like what are you doing?
When your misogynistic buddy there who sent you down this path is the one going, maybe not this one,
right, there is something wrong with her.
You should probably listen to him.
Yes. Come come hit some golf balls with me on the roof.
Yeah.
You can tell how athletic I am. I shoot golf balls.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, he well, now I'm all flustered.
Thinking about golf.
Yeah. This, I think unfortunately the lasting legacy of this is that it is pointed to as one that kicked off the torture porn genre. Yeah. Where this was a favorite movie of Eli Roth. There's been which led directly into him making Hostel, which was a big one of those movies. And
Yeah.
I am willing to listen to the 20 years later takes on the torture porn era, lionizing it as being underrated or misunderstood or whatever. Or I saw something today where it was talking about it was an unfair label because what it was doing was bringing horror movies into the realism of a post 9/11 world or something like that. I'm like, oh sure, fine, whatever.
Yeah, I don't
Like-
have the PhDs to argue with that one. So
Yeah,
fine.
like is what they're doing in Hostel really that much different than what they were doing in Cannibal Holocaust? I don't know. But yeah, I kind of, it bums me out when this gets lumped in. I mean, Miike is an extreme director. Like this is
Yes.
not the only movie he's
No.
done with a fucked up scene.
No.
in it.
I
Like
mean,
a lot of them.
Ichi the Killer is just
Right.
an entire fucked up scene for the whole movie.
Right.
Yeah.
So and he famously when Showtime was doing the Masters of Horror series in the mid 2000s, they're getting all these famous horror directors to
Yeah.
do 1 hour episodes of television. They hired him and they said, do whatever you want.
Oh no.
Could not air it because it was so over the top and insane. I have yet to see it. I would like to see it at some point, but I don't know how easy it is to find at this point because it was so intense that they could not put it on TV.
I am not surprised.
Yeah. So he has a reputation.
Yes.
But this movie overall, I think, is so much more thoughtful
Yes.
than a lot of the movies that were inspired by it.
Yes.
I think unfortunately, like a lot of these types of things, whether it's this or the influence of The Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen on comic books,
Yeah.
I think people took the wrong things from it.
Yes.
Like they said, oh, blood and guts, intense, really
Yep.
awful torture scenes. Awesome. Let's do that. A bunch of that. Oh, superheroes that are all dark and brooding and
Yes.
hyper violent. I understand what these are about. Let's do more of that. You always see people end up taking they're taking the flash, but they're not taking the substance.
Yeah.
And I think this movie has a lot more substance than probably many people give it credit for, given its reputation.
Yes. I think it has a reputation for being so shocking and so gory and so violent and so horrifying, and in a weird way. I mean, it is in some ways, there are some really gross out scenes in this. There's a, torture sequence, I would call it. But if you've watched a movie like Saw or Hostel or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remakes, or like, you know what I mean? Like any Hills Have Eyes, like any of those sorts of like movies that came out in that like early to mid 2000s era, this can seem almost downright tame.
Honestly, as we were watching it, I mean, that sequence still works really well. But
Yeah,
if you kind of take a step back, the stuff you're actually seeing, they've probably done on TV at this point. Like in The Walking Dead, probably something similar has happened.
Oh yeah.
The thing that makes it so horrifying, because I was like, this isn't actually as bad as I remember it.
Yeah. It's not as like graphic.
Yeah, it's still pretty graphic.
It's still
don't get me wrong.
pretty
but,
no, yeah.
but it's not quite as bad as I remembered.
Yes.
Because I remember the first time watching this, like with my hand over my mouth the entire time, going like, "Oh my god!" And the reason that it works like that isn't the gore; it's everything that brought you to that point.
Yes.
Yeah,
and I mean, most of the gory stuff is pretty contained to that end sequence. Like, there's a couple things leading up to it. You see the disembodied tongue flapping in the pool of blood on the floor.
I would like to point out that I
Yes.
really, really, really appreciate that we get the story about that
Yes.
from someone just telling it, and they didn't do like a
reenactment.
Let's show the story.
Kinda, yeah.
Because that has so much power to it when it's done well.
Yes.
Like, would you really have preferred if they showed what happened to the USS Indianapolis versus Quint telling you what happened?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's like the centerpiece of that whole movie is the Indianapolis monologue from Quint.
Yep.
I don't want to see like that's
No. If they had cut to ocean, night,
Right.
flaming boat sinking,
Yeah.
men screaming in the dark water, it just would not have been the same.
Yeah, and it, obviously the guy telling the story in this is not exactly Robert Shaw, but maybe he is. I don't know. I don't.
He's the Japanese Robert Shaw, and you didn't even know it.
Yeah, it's very possible. But like the fact that they tell you that story and don't show it to you allows you to just. It allows your brain to work it up.
When we see the tongue and the fingers and the ear and the blood on the floor, that is a vision that Aoyama's brain has given him.
Exactly.
And like that story is working that way on him the same way it's working on us.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so beyond that and a couple other brief snippets, like really the goriest stuff is really just there at the end.
Right.
Which is interesting for a movie that has such a reputation for being like, oh my God, it's so hard to watch. It's so horrifying. I couldn't get through it. It's like, but it's fairly like, you watch like an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 30 minutes of this movie before you get to that point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I would wonder. I mean, I watched this knowing its reputation and it still worked.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine if you didn't know what you were getting into with this.
I didn't.
You really? Oh man.
No, I knew it was like, I was thinking it was like, okay, scary Japanese horror movie. The cover's got this woman, like the old cover, like it was like her face. It looked kind of, I don't know, at least the cover I remember. I think that's it. Yeah, where she's holding up the needle.
Yep.
So I had an idea that something went weird with her, but I did not know what I was getting into.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was extremely effective.
I do appreciate the placement of the bad guy because,
Yes.
like we said multiple times, this is such a slow burn, like relationship kind of movie that unless you give people an indication that this movie's kind of fucked up,
Yeah.
I feel like it's very easy to bail on it before it gets to the good stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Because it does have this very like kind of almost like intentionally boring quality in the beginning where it's like lulling you into this sense of security. And then, there's that scene we talked about earlier with her slumped on the floor and her head has just been like lower. It's like lower and lower and all the bones in the back of her neck and her shoulders are standing out and the phone in the bag. It's like,
And it's not to jump all the way back into it, but that I find that scene to be so interesting because she is like, it's almost like the monster has gone away or is like is going away, and then the phone rings and she gets this like perverse little slow smile.
Right.
And it's like if he hadn't called her, would none of this have happened?
Not to him.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think he would have dodged the bullet, as they say.
Opened Pandora's box.
Yeah. I do just want to say that at the very end, where she has tried to chase the son up the stairs with the like pepper spray or whatever she has.
For some reason I maybe I just like my brain just extrapolated out because the rest of it was so intense. I assumed it was like acid or something.
I think it's like mace or pepper spray.
Yeah,
I think she's just trying to incapacitate him, and then she's going to do just as horrible things to him as she's doing to his father. But like, so he kicks her, and she falls down the stairs, and she breaks her neck. And that very end where she's laying with her head twisted towards Aoyama, who has crawled at least partially over and told his son to call the police, and she starts reciting things she had said to him during their dates, is one of the scariest and like best things I think about this movie, because she's saying them verbatim. She's saying them word for word, which is like, you rehearse this. You say these things to men over and over again. Like, you know exactly what they all want to hear, and they all want to hear the same thing. And so that's why you have these are just lines that she had memorized. Yeah. That I just love it. I think it ties it all back in that, she went to an audition and she's been acting the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that connection though, but that's about the audition, and she's
Yeah.
been playing a role. Yeah, that's pretty good. I do find the actual way that she gets killed a little bit unsatisfying. The way that he just like kicks her down the stairs, but I think that's just.
I wish there was a little
filmmaking or
bit
something.
more of a fight. Like I wish they kind of struggled a little bit more, but I think it actually kind of works for the character because
Mm-hmm.
like he's just this teenage boy who's just come home and he does not know this woman,
Sure,
and
sure.
she's this beautiful young petite woman, and he seems very reluctant to like do anything towards her. He
Right.
only kicks her because she's coming after him and trying to spray him with this, and if it is mace or pepper spray, even the little bit that's getting misted on his face is going to sting like a motherfucker.
Right,
So it's like he only it kind of preserves the son as like the good character in the movie, where he only hurts her when he's really been provoked, and he clearly does not intend to kill her.
That's
Like,
true. Yeah.
So I think it works given the character setup.
Yeah. So this is number 165 on our list.
Yes.
How do you feel about that placement? Would you think it should go up, go down, or be removed completely? Because this is an interesting movie because this doesn't fall under Wes's categorization of what a horror movie would be.
True.
Do you consider this to be a horror movie, or is this more? I mean, I feel like if there's this much blood, there's really only one kind of movie it can be.
Yeah.
Unless it's like Macbeth or something.
Yeah. No, I think this is a horror movie. I think there's enough of the psychological element, and I do think if we're counting all the sort of like, as we're calling them, the torture porn subgenre movies would count as horror movies.
Yeah.
Saw and Hostel and all of those. Yeah, I count this as a horror movie.
Yeah, I would too.
I feel pretty good about the placement, I
Yeah.
think. I'm sure I could nitpick it and compare it to a couple movies here or there and be like, well, it should be way higher than this, or it should be way lower than that. But I feel like having it in like the upper ranges of the the like 150 to 200 range, that feels right to me. I do think that like it belongs on this list. Yeah, I think it's actually pretty approximate to where I would put it.
Yeah, I think it definitely deserves to be on the list. I'm actually kind of surprised it's not higher.
Yeah.
Given its reputation and how people generally have nothing but good things to say about it.
Yeah.
Especially,
that's true. I do think it's still, I mean, it has a reputation, but I do think it's still lesser known.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just, I did a little bit of Googling as I was looking to see if there was anything about the different readings of it or whatever. And I came across multiple like retrospective articles because it was 99. So a couple years ago was the 20th anniversary of it. So
Got
there
it.
was, people writing about it, and they were all, effusive with praise,
Of course.
which was part of why I thought, I'm surprised it's not a little bit closer to 100 maybe.
Yeah.
Especially given the other shit on this list. But yeah, I think 165 is probably pretty good. Yeah, like you're saying, somewhere like 150, 165, I think probably makes the most sense. Speaking of our list, the housekeeping that the only reason you're still listening to this because you want to know.
I want to know too. I don't know.
What is going on with the housekeeping? Well, earlier today, I hit our randomizer button beep, boop, 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 to see what we were going to be doing next.
Yes.
And it landed on number 60.
Okay.
And I think this is going to be a first for us because number 60 is A Quiet Place 2, which just came out.
Oh, wow.
So I looked at the list. There has been quite a shakeup in our list.
Oh.
Almost everything has changed.
Okay. Again.
I'll try to do this as quickly as possible. The Shining has gone from 113 to 111. Frankenstein has remained the same. Wes Craven's New Nightmare went from 179 to 181. Quiet Place went from 10 to 9.
Huh.
American Psycho still at 200.
Okay.
Let Me In has gone from 93 to 95. Dead Alive 134 to 136. This is all secondary moves for a lot of these. So they've been moved around a couple times. Ginger Snaps has the biggest move,
Okay.
I think. going from 144 to 128.
Whoa.
And when we started the show, when we did Ginger Snaps, it was number 131. So it's gone from 131 to 144 to 128.
Holy shit.
House of the Devil is 155. It formerly 143. Texas Chainsaw had been 98. Now it's 87.
Okay.
Girl Walks Home Alone at Night dropped down from 45 to 44. A lot of these are small increments.
Yeah,
The
like
Fly,
2s and 3s.
The Fly has gone from 72 to 73. Carrie from 50 to 51. Halloween 2018 has gone 92 to 90. When we started, Halloween 2018 was 91, so it has been 91, 92, and now 90. Candyman 183 to 182. The Thing 135 to 132. Fright Night has gone from 101 to 102. Wreck 144 to 147. It 41 to 35. Oculus went from 182 to 185. Black Christmas moved up the list, not as much as I'd like, from 199 to 194.
We're getting there, guys. Keep watching it.
Yes. We're going to get Black Christmas to number 1 by the end of this. Poltergeist 137 to 126. Scream 175 to 173. You're Next 168 to 166. Cabin in the Woods 30 to 31. Deep Red 73 to 72. Hereditary 18 to 15. Sisters 144 to 139. Dr. Phibes dropped, unfortunately, from 119 to 123. The Invisible Man 2020 has gone from 9 to 10. Audition remains the same. And number 60, our next movie, is A Quiet Place Part 2, which I think we should go and see in the theater.
Yeah.
Which will be fun because we haven't been able to do that. We haven't covered a modern movie where we can do that yet.
Yeah.
So I think we should take advantage of it. And
I haven't been in a
theater.
movie theater in probably almost like 2 years at
Well,
this
there
point.
you go. Excellent.
So.
Perfect movie to go see. It's like getting crazy good reviews.
Yeah.
I saw one person who I follow thought it was terrible. So
Uh-oh.
what that means, I don't know.
There's always one.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for Audition.
Yes.
And thank you guys for listening. This comes out. We should still be in June at this point. And if so, keep your eyes open. If you want to follow our Patreon coverage of Friday the 13th, we'll be doing Friday the 13th Part 6. Jason Lives, which is going to be fun.
I'm looking forward to that.
And you can help support us and listen to that if you want to go to the patreon.com/the Penske File. The Penske File is our umbrella corporation, so to speak. But thank you guys for listening. Amanda, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Clay.
And we'll see you next time at the movies with A Quiet Place Part 2.
Bye, everyone.